I believe actually that SMU can significantly contribute to that future. I'll take the advantage of my position as chair before I open it for questions to the room to ask you a question. And it has more to do with a remark that you made and that I witnessed when we were in the International Academic Advisory Panel, when our advisors told us that we didn't have a role model anymore and that we needed to now develop our own new ideas. And I, on the one hand, that was a very strong compliment to Singapore, because it says that in a very short period of time we have caught up with the best in the world. At the same time, it's a daunting task to say we now have to set actually the example and come up with the innovations for the world. And maybe I would ask you, from your privileged position of observing the educational sector, whether you can give us a few examples of where you think that Singapore already is leading, can be a role model for other countries.
Well, Arnold, first of all, I would hesitate to say that Singapore can be a role model. I think that we are always happy to share our experiences, what we have gone through. We have learned a lot from other countries, and we believe that we have a responsibility to share our experiences. When the IAP made the observation that Singapore has caught up with other countries in the area of education, I thought that this was a very worrying statement, because it's always risky to be the pioneer. In the past, when we were catching up, we always had somebody to study from. We look at what they have done, we look at the mistakes, we look at what they have gone through, and therefore we take their experiences and we adapt it to Singapore. And in that way, I think that that's one of the main reasons why we have made such rapid progress, which I think, thankfully, very few mistakes. But today, we have run out of role models to learn from. So in a sense, when you have caught up and there's really no one you can learn from, this means that you have arrived at the stage when you can start making your own mistakes. And I think that this is where we have to give a lot of thought. And the reason for my lecture this morning is to try and sketch out some of the principles which I'm sure the Ministry of Education would take into consideration as they work out this very difficult task of where our higher education sector will go to in the next decades. But some of the areas which I think have attracted a lot of attention worldwide is, for example, our primary and secondary school education. These are regarded as being among the best in the world. And Singapore students in our primary, even secondary schools, do well in international assessments. The competence of our students is undoubted. And what is very unusual is that this is across the board. It's not only just in a few schools. If you go to any school in Singapore, whether it's one of the well-known schools or one of the neighborhood schools, the standard of competence of the principals, the teachers, the quality of the learning which the students get is high. And this differentiates Singapore from many other countries. It's a complete contrast to, for example, the United States. The US has some of the best schools in the world, public schools, private schools. The US also has some of the worst schools in the world, particularly in the inner cities. And the standard is variable from a school in inner city, in one of the big cities like Philadelphia, New York, to a school in the suburbs, which is situated among affluent residents, standards are very high. And I think that what has drawn the attention of educationists around the world to Singapore is how do we achieve this very high level of competence and learning throughout the whole school system, and allowing within that system peaks of excellence to develop in our school. And that is fundamental because what is important is not just to have a few specialized schools which reach a very high standard, but that our whole school population, our whole population is available, is able to take advantage of educational opportunities which gives them a good start in life, despite, no matter what is their background, what is their family circumstances. And I think that this is one of the great successes which Singapore has achieved since our independence. As I said in my speech, 65, only 3% of each cohort went on to have some form of higher education. Today, over 90% of our students leave school and go on to either university, polytechnics, or IT to have some post-secondary training before they embark on a job. And to me, I mean, that's one of the great achievements of Singapore.
So can I now open for questions from the room? Please, can I ask you to state your name and your background or institution where you come from?
Good morning, Dr. Tan. Allow me to first thank you for making Singapore Management University a reality through your silver wisdom and intelligent vision. My question presumes that you'll be the next president of Singapore. It concerns the biggest decision Singapore has ever made since independence. Will you ever approve a limitless guarantee of all bank deposits, or will you modify it?
Will I ever approve a limitless guarantee of all bank deposits? I think that one of the first things which one learns in life, whether in economics, finance, or other areas, is that one never says never. And the reason why that is so is that one never knows what the future will bring about. You have to look at the circumstances of each problem, the importance to Singapore, the consequences of what happened if you do the wrong decisions. And I think that we have seen a very dramatic example of this in the last few years. There is going to be endless debate and dispute as to whether it was right for the US government to allow Lehman Brothers to collapse, which then triggered off the Great Recession of 2008, 2009, which almost brought us back to the 1930s. If it were not for the strong actions of the central banks and the government authorities led by the US Fed, Mr. Ben Bernanke in particular, we would be facing 20% unemployment today. And the world will be a very bleak place. So, Mr. Bernanke took unprecedented action to do whatever is necessary, providing money in unlimited quantities to financial institutions to keep the system afloat. And that saved us. Now, similar situation occurs here due to contagion from some crisis overseas, affects our banks, affects confidence in Singapore. Do we take unprecedented action? Maybe. But fortunately for Singapore, unlike other countries which have similar action and don't have the means, the reserves that we have built up over the last 40 years enable us to take this action without compromising our financial integrity and without our falling into deeper problems. So we are not like Iceland, which did the same thing and became essentially bankrupt. We are not like Ireland, for example, which guaranteed the banks and ran into grave problems. So the lesson for that is, it's not the action which is important, but do you have the reserves? Do you have the backing? Do you have the ability to take this action? And when a similar situation, if ever a similar situation should arise in the future, which I sincerely hope not, because you do not know how close we were to a total collapse in the world financial system in 2008, 2009. We escaped with minimal damage. And Singapore's recession was extremely short. But don't press your luck. Same thing happens again 5-6 years from now. We may not have another Ben Bernanke heading the US Fed. And then all the problems which we face today, all the issues we face, actually would seem to be very trivial compared to the financial and economic catastrophe that could befall us.
Thank you very much.
Can I invite other questions? And I hope that we can stick to the topic of education. Yeah. Can I ask you to introduce yourself, first?
Hello. Sir, I hope you remember me. My name is Takala. I was at Sembawang GRC last time. Actually here, I'm actually speaking for the brain-injured population in Singapore. I myself, I was featured on television about 17 times for my brain injury where I lost my memory. I have to start all over again. But when I recover, I find that we don't have a very conducive environment here because we don't provide for re-education of people who suffer trauma. And I just have a magazine I received from Australia, Synapse. It says that Australia has about 1.6 million people actually affected by brain injury. So here, I ask, what is the future of higher education for us, the brain injured, as well as other uniquely challenged people in Singapore? Because other than educating us, the uniquely challenged, perhaps we should consider educating the community of people around us. Because I actually have quite a terrible recovery phase. A lot of people view me with biased opinion. Before my 7 facial correction surgery, I look really ugly. With my broken leg, I had to amputate and elongate my leg. But all this takes perseverance as well as some kind of mindset building. Thanks to the education system, it gave me a very good foundation that helped me not topple. Thank you. Perhaps you can share.
Thank you. First, may I say how sorry I am about your circumstances and the trauma which you had to go through. I'm sure you must have been terrible for not only for yourself but for your family.
My father died of heart attack because of accident.
And your loved ones. I would say that when I said in my speech that we should try in Singapore to make arrangements so that every citizen, every Singaporean can realize his or her potential, I think this is not only limited to those who are healthy, who are able, but also those who suffer some injury like you, or those who are handicapped. And we can improve on what we have today, and I think that this is something which, given the level of development which Singapore has achieved, we should look into the circumstances of people who need help, people who have suffered injury, people who are handicapped, and help them also to live fulfilling lives. And this, of course, will require additional effort, and I hope that the government will make the effort, and if within my ability, there is certainly one of the areas which I would certainly like to pay much more attention to. I believe that for many people in Singapore, given help from the government, from civic society, from private institutions, they can reach another level of life, that their life is not over, that there is still a life ahead of them. And not only can they be do things to support themselves, but they should also be able to contribute to society and to their civic organizations. And all of us, I think, would like to be in that position. And I hope that it's an area which I would like to spend a great deal of time on and to talk to the government, other bodies, civic society, and I think that is an area which Singapore should pay attention to in the coming years.
Thank you, sir. So, I've been a teacher before. Perhaps give me a moment. I say another question, a quick one.
Can I shift to other questions so that everybody has an opportunity to ask questions? I have somebody there, and then a second person here. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, it works.
Thank you. My name is Cynthia Gibson, and I'm in Singapore as a project-based developer of higher education projects. Thank you, Dr. Tan. I'm honored to be here and to have heard your speech this morning. I've learned very much, and I'm deeply impressed with the Singapore education system, primary through tertiary. My question is, what is your frank assessment of the role of private education institutes that have recently been re-regulated by CPE and are undergoing some changes in the higher education futures here in Singapore? Thank you.
Well, let me say in general that I believe that private education does have a place in Singapore if it's well run and courses are well taught. And one example, for example, is UNISIM, which is a private education, which I think does an excellent job in providing university education to people who are not able to do it on a full-time basis in our public institutions. We can do it on a part-time basis while they are doing their day jobs. For other private institutions, of course, I think we have to carefully guard Singapore's reputation as a safe, reliable place. If people come here for education, they must be assured, they and their parents must be assured that the institution which they attend here will give them the quality of education which have been advertised when they go out to recruit students. I think the Council for Private Education in Singapore is doing a systematic job of going through all the institutions. I'm sure that at the end of the day, standards will be raised and that the private education sector will be not only enhanced but also strengthened as a result of this initiative by the government.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Morning, Dr. Tan. I'd like to ask you a question.
Can you introduce yourself?
Oh, yes. Ko Tai An from Center for Liberal Arts and Social Sciences, NTU. Yes, I'd like to ask you a question with reference to your comment about change and the necessary agility to meet the challenges of change, including accelerated change. And then you mentioned about shaping the future, and hopefully that few mistakes have been made. I was there when you became the first Vice Chancellor of NUS and Minister of Education. I moved to NIE, and I'm now with NTU, been there for 16 years, and therefore have seen quite closely your influence on higher education, because when you step down as Minister of Education, you retain the portfolio of being responsible for higher education. I'd like to ask you this question. Given these challenges of meeting change, and I might add, the law of inadvertent consequences, looking back over these many years, and you're in the most fortunate position to be able to answer such a question, has there been any wrong turn that has been made, that you feel something could have been learned from and you learned from, and what that might be, and whether some decision that you have made which has also been the right one and for which today you feel has had a great influence on higher education. Thank you. It's a large general question, and perhaps you might want to talk about specifics.
Well, I can say as a general principle that we have made mistakes. Everybody makes mistakes. If you don't make mistakes, you do not progress. But I would also say, as a general principle, it's always better to look ahead to see what needs to be done and what are the problems to be solved. I don't see really a great deal of benefit in looking back to see what might have happened in hypothetical cases. We have to look back to see areas which we can improve, and I'm sure there will be many of them. But my approach has always been to study the past, but look to the future, because that is where that is what will benefit us. It's not that you completely forget about what you have done or you don't study your decisions, but it's more beneficial, I think, to look ahead and to see what are the new issues which come up, the new challenges, rather than to perhaps spend a lot of time discussing what might have happened, what I did right, what I did wrong. Although, of course, one has to have a sense of history, because as somebody once said, I mean, those who neglect history are doomed to repeating it again, and I think that's a very sensible move. Are there any facilities for the students in the other lecture theatre to ask questions? I don't know whether it's possible.
Yes.
Yes, we should allow them. Right? Yeah.
In the meantime, can you... Yeah.
Hi, Dr. Tan. I'm Heather Ling from the Associated Press. As you know, Singapore ministers have some of the highest salaries in the world, which in turn have fostered some resentment among many Singaporeans who consider it excessive. You are running for president, which currently has a salary of more than 3 million. So do you think that this is excessive? The government is also reviewing the salaries of top government officials. How much do you think the president's salary should be lowered by? 10, 50%, and what would be fair to you?
I'm not sure that it has a lot to do with education, but I'll...
Well, as you know, that there has been a committee which has been set up under the chairmanship of Mr. Gerard Ee, with a number of people from various sectors to look into this whole issue of ministerial salaries, including that of the president. The committee is presently doing its work, collecting data, and I don't think that I should preempt the decisions or make any comment, but like everybody else, ministers and so on, I will abide by the decision. I'm sure that they'll make a good and wise conclusion.
Yeah. Do we have questions from the other room, or otherwise, yeah.
Thank you. I'm Quinn from SUTD. Coming back to the topic of the futures of higher education, I'd like to find out, what do you think is the role of the Singapore higher education sector, not only in Singapore context, but in the region, and also in the international landscape, especially in face of competition with these very good regional universities, and also universities from the US and the UK?
As I said in my lecture, I think the first and primary task of our institutions of higher learning in Singapore must be to prepare Singaporeans to meet the challenges which lie ahead, and to make sure our young people are able to operate successfully, to have fulfilling careers, no matter how the future evolves. In a sense, you can use a buzzword. I think one of the principal responsibilities of our universities, polytechnics, and ITs is to, I don't like this word, but I think it seems according to future-proof our students, so that whatever be the future that lies ahead, because we cannot predict it, students will have the skills, the mindset, the ability to take these challenges in their stride and to have fulfilling careers, and to look to the future with confidence, not with dread. And I think this is very important. Beyond that, of course, given Singapore's position in this part of the world, particularly, we can help, as I said, in a modest way to raise standards. We take in students from other countries, they go back, they occupy important positions, and in a sense that is Singapore's contribution and best contribution in developing the economies, standards of governance in our part of the world.
Are there any questions from students? Yeah.
Hi. Morning, Dr. Tan and Prof. Arnold. So I'm actually Don Liu, a graduate from SMU recently, and I have a question for Dr. Tan, and that is with the proliferation of all these institutes of higher education, together with the opening of SUTD and the influx of students and graduates who are actually highly educated, what would be the repercussions on the workforce? Would it be able to take in the influx of such people, these people who are highly educated, and would there be a possibility where where the workforce cannot sustain this influx of people, and a possible depression, of pay and salaries of people who are already in the workforce because of this new supply of students and graduates? Yeah, thank you.
Well, I take it that basically your question is there a possibility of an oversupply of graduates in the coming years with all of these institutions, and you'll find job opportunities difficult? And the answer is yes, there will be an oversupply if the economy does not grow. If the economy remains stagnant, if we have a long recession, then of course there will be not enough work. But I think that but I'm optimistic. We live, Singapore has one great advantage. We live in a part of the world which is fundamentally growing. Asia is fundamentally growing. And this will be the case for many decades. Some people have projected that the Chinese economy will overtake that of the US by 2030. And India may overtake the US by 2050. Two largest economies in the world, located in our part of the world. And they will generate a lot of demand. There is also a rising tide of affluence, greater wealth being generated here. The question is not whether there will be jobs for graduates, but whether our graduates and the institutions that train them can give them the skills, can give them the ability to spot the opportunities to take advantage of areas of demand. One thing I see different from the past, if things go on well, I see more of our graduates, more of our people coming up from our institutes of higher learning becoming entrepreneurs, launching their own companies. They may work for the government or for a big company for a few years, but I think more and more of them will find little areas where they can have a good career. And there are so many new professions which one never heard of before. Web designers, for example. These are very specialized people, and it's an area of growth. But fundamentally, the Asia-Pacific economy is going to be the driver of the global economy. Singaporean is located right in the heart of the Asia-Pacific. And I think that if we do our job right, if our institutions can train our people well, I don't think that there will be lack of opportunities, not only within Singapore, but I also see more of Singaporeans going out into other countries in this part of the world, or even overseas, further away, in order to realize their dreams, fulfill their potential. And what it does require is to have the confidence, the ability, the mindset that you can shape your own career, you can build your own career. You don't need to depend on somebody telling you that this is a job we have to do for the rest of our life, because that's not going to be the case. It's also going to be difficult task for companies, even for governments, I think, to accommodate to these new challenges. But this is life. Life is a matter of adjusting to new circumstances and being able to take advantage of them and to operate successfully, whatever be the changes.
Yeah. One or two short questions.
Yeah, try to keep it short. Dr. Tan, it's an honor to be here. I'm from the Netherlands and I'm a PhD student in Australia. At the moment, I'm in Singapore for a tour in Southeast Asia to meet with young emerging leaders in your locality and see what challenges they face on the issues you address. Today we will have a meeting here. And I wondered, with my conversations in different universities across the globe, there was a very strong remark on that we are living in very turbulent times, not only by economic challenges, but also on an ecological and social level. And as young people who are 51% of the world population in the age category of 18 to 35 years, there is a stress on that we have an important responsibility to tackle the most pressing challenges of our century. In my conversations with young leaders here so far, I understood that they struggle with finding a balance between academic excellence and finding meaning and giving back to society. And I wonder, you addressed this already, but I wonder what are the concrete pathways for them to find that balance, to excel and also give back to society in a more concrete way? Thank you.
I think finding the right balance is always a difficult job for everyone, whether it's between work and life, whether it's between academic excellence and giving back to society. I don't see a contradiction between the two pursuits, but it's for each individual to decide how to work that balance. And later on in life, all of us will have multiple demands on our time, with family, with work, with community, with leisure pursuits. It's always going to be a continuous struggle throughout one's life. There is no simple answer to that. I think one has to just from time to time and to try and correct course if necessary, but I don't see any contradiction between pursuing academic excellence and giving back to society.
I see that there are 3 people waiting for a question. Maybe I'll take all 3 of you in one go and then you can answer. Yeah.
Good morning.
Keep your questions short, please.
Professor, I just have a 2-part question. I'm sorry, I'm Michelle. I am studying in my final year in SMU, and I'm also looking into how we can improve the SMU experience for students. So I've got 2 parts. One is, can you give us a concise definition of what a Singaporean student should be by the end of the education system? And secondly, what is the unique role that SMU can play, given that we are also here with 4 other institutions, key institutions at this time?
Can I reply to this question first, whether I can give a concise definition of what Singapore should be? The answer is very simple, I cannot, so.
Yeah, and the second question would be, what's the unique role that SMU can play in society now?
Oh.
Shall I take the 2 other questions first?
Yes, okay, all right, yeah.
Can we take the 2 other questions and then I'll see how
Hi, I'm Dennis Ang from Nanyang Polytechnic School of Business Management. Just a quick question. Right, as Dr. Tan, as you mentioned, entrepreneurship is a key driver to Singapore's economy, and it's the new ideas of is important for our future. Considering Bill Gates, Steve Jobs, who have not completed higher education, what would you envision to develop in higher education in Singapore that would cultivate this entrepreneurial mindset?
Okay, hi, I'm Wei Liang, a student, soon-to-be student of SUTD, hopefully to increase the student representation here. I understand, as you mentioned just now, there's a great risk in being a pioneer, so...
Sorry, the great risk of
being a pioneer.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, taking that risk. Anyway, my question, a short question, would be, upcoming National Day, I would like to ask, what ideas might you have for keeping Singaporeans rooted to Singapore and not going elsewhere after they finish their higher education? I mean, this is, I understand, I mean, my perception of this is that this is largely intangible things that keep Singaporeans rooted to Singapore, but do you have any ideas perhaps of anything tangible that might help retain our Singaporeans? Yeah.
Okay, right. Well, first of all, I think the question on entrepreneurship, I think that this will develop naturally because I see that Singaporean students, when they graduate, looking less towards saying that I graduate, I will join this company, and I work there for the rest of my life. We do need people like that who are happy in their work. But I think more and more Singaporeans will say, is there an area where I can launch my own business? And I think our universities all now, including SMU, have not only courses but also innovation funds. And I think that this has been one of the major changes in our universities and polytechnics the last few years, that the recognition that the job of the institution is not only to teach and do research, but also to help their students to launch careers. And I think that it's an area which I'm very happy with because it's a completely new mindset of the faculty that we can see that this is a very exciting area. It takes time. Also, the government has in place many schemes in order to help entrepreneurs. Our venture capital industry has grown many-fold the last 10 years. And all of this, we are building an ecosystem here, which I think will help young people to launch their own careers or their own businesses. Now, the question about being a pioneer, I hope I've not discouraged you from joining SUTD. Yes, being a pioneer is risky, but being a pioneer also is exciting because you're breaking new ground. For example, when SMU was first set up, the first graduate students were pioneers, and they came in. I mean, they were excited by what they see, and I think that they have never regretted their decision to come to SMU. Many of them could have gone to more established universities like NUS or NTU, but they took a chance and they succeeded. And I think it speaks well of them that they have this determination and they are excited by the vision. Then the other question about whether Singaporeans should go overseas and work, I think this is inevitable because the world is a globalized economy now. Singapore is part of that. You will find that whatever job you do, whatever profession you're working in, you'll find part of our life having to work overseas. And I think that fundamentally this is good for Singapore. I think one of the saying is that one of the jobs of schools, educational institutions is actually to give our people roots in Singapore while giving them wings to spread their abilities abroad. So these are two very important components. So Singapore will become more international in the coming years, but I hope that they will continue to have very strong roots in Singapore. And I think that this is something which is a natural development of Singapore being an international, globalized city. The final question about what I see for SMU in the coming years is I will hand over to Professor Arnold to answer that question.
Thank you. I will not use this as a platform to give you my strategy. But before I thank you, Dr. Tan, I would like to ask you a last question, and that is, you were referring in your speech to say that many of us will have not 1, 2, 3, or 4 careers, and that it is for reasons of economic but also self-fulfillment that one changes career. We all know in this room that you want to change career. And I also know from my colleagues in the law school that the constraints on this new job, the constitutional constraints, are quite strong. But maybe you can give us a glimpse of what you think a president can do to further education in Singapore.
Well, let me say that I took this decision to run for the presidency after a great deal of thought. I was extremely happy as a private citizen with my jobs at GIC, at SPH, and to give it all up is to run for the presidency. First of all, a very great risk, but also, giving up 2 jobs which I love and going to a new career is a difficult decision, but I did it not because I'm convinced I will win, it's a risk, but because I felt that given the challenges which Singapore faces, I have to try, so that if I can make a contribution to ensuring that Singapore remains prosperous and progress, improve the lives of Singaporeans, then I think it would be my duty to try, and I hope that I will be able to be given that opportunity to serve Singapore and Singaporeans. Again, in the area of education, I think the presidency, whoever he is, can actually play a very great role, because while the president doesn't have executive authority, through his influence, through the areas which he concentrates on, through the causes which he champions, can make a great impact. And in the area of education, I think this is particularly true. So with regard to schools, for example, the fundamental starting point for all education, I think the president can, by his presence, his patronage, his visits to schools, talks to teachers, principals, students, I think help to maintain these very high standards which we have and to further improve on them. Also, with regard to the ITs, the polytechnics and the universities, for example, Ms. Nathan has spent a great deal of time with the universities. I know he enjoys it. And I think that not only is an area which the president can and should spend a lot of time on, I think it's most enjoyable activity, meeting with students, with faculty, and perhaps is one of the areas which is one of the areas which president can look forward to. And I've always enjoyed my interactions with schools, with teachers, with students, with faculty, students in the polys, IT, and with the universities. I've come to SMU many times, and I think it's always, on each visit I've learned something. I've met new people. I've had a chance to interact with students, and I think that this recharges you and gives you a very optimistic outlook ahead, and that's the beauty of working with young people.
Thank you very much. I found your insights about openness, comprehensiveness and flexibility very relevant and very important for us, and I hope that SMU we can contribute in achieving some of that the challenge. We know that we don't have too many role models anymore, and that we will have, as you say, have to shape our own future. Pioneering is difficult, but it's in the genetic pattern of SMU, so I'm sure we will do well. Thank you very much for your openness.
Thank you, Dr. Tan and Professor Di Meyer. Please remain on stage for just a while more. With the close of the Q&A session, we have now come to the end of the lecture. Thank you, Dr. Tan, for coming to SMU campus and leading us in thinking about the futures of higher education. I would like to invite SMU President to present to Dr. Tan a token of our appreciation. On behalf of SMU and all of us, thank you for your insightful lecture.